They brought bylaws, I brought land deeds. Karen showed up like a pastel banshee at 6:30, a women, screeching out of her golf cart and slapping a laminated violation notice on my gate like she was blessing it with bureaucratic holy water. Behind her, a squad of neon-vested clipboard warriors setting up cones like it was a suburban war zone. I stood there in my flag boxers, holding coffee, watching them fence off my own land. Oh, honey, they just clinged the wrong driveway. They came at 6:30 AOA sharp, not a minute early, not a second late, like they were summoned by Satan's alarm clock. 5 of them, in matching neon vests and HOA-issued smugness, marched down my gravel drive like it was Normandy. I was on my porch, barefoot, holding a half-filled mug of bitter cowboy coffee and wearing boxers with tiny American flags on them, the kind of look that says I fought in 3 wars, but I draw the line at pants before 7 a.m. The leader, a man with a clipboard, mirrored sunglasses, and the kind of gelled hair that screams middle management in crisis, pointed dramatically at the entrance to my ranch. Subsection 12B, he announced. This main entrance is in clear violation of uniform ingress design, and as of this moment, it is officially non-compliant. The others nodded in solemn HOA solidarity like he'd just cited scripture. Then came the staple. He stapled a laminated notice right onto my wooden fence, like he was tagging a condemned building. The paper fluttered in the breeze like a white flag made of bureaucracy. I blinked, slowly, the kind of blink that says, I'm deciding if you're worth yelling at or just going straight to quiet revenge. Then, heels clicked on gravel. Enter the queen. There she was, with Karen in her full pastel regalia, visored, bedazzled, and exuding authority like a discount district attorney. Her jogging suit matched the HOA logo, subtle branding, terrifying execution. She approached like she was delivering a royal decree, holding a second laminated notice high above her shoulder, as if raising the HOA Excalibur. She slapped it on the gate post and turned to me with a smile so condescending it probably came with a diploma. It's official now, she said. Her voice had that crisp, nasal tone, somewhere between a kindergarten teacher and a malfunctioning GPS. I didn't answer, just sipped my coffee and scratched Buster behind the ears. He growled, smart dog. They started howling out cones, tape, and a folding table. One of them actually pulled out a lawn chair and a binder the size of a small Bible, probably full of bylaws that no one's read since the Bush administration. I watched, unimpressed. They moved with purpose, but not intelligence, like ants who thought they'd just conquered a picnic but didn't notice the boot overhead. And in that moment, I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I simply turned and went back inside. Because, you see, they brought laminated bylaws. I brought land deeds. And the best part, that stretch of gravel they were fencing off like it was Area 51, that wasn't their road. It was mine. Legally, quietly, stupidly overlooked by the very people now planting cones on it like they were claiming territory in some HOA version of Monopoly. Let them finish. Let them feel victorious. Because when you fought in Kandahar and survive 3 divorces, you learn one thing. Never interrupt your enemy when they're digging their own hole. And oh boy, were they about to hit bedrock. I didn't slam the door when I went back inside. I closed it like a man sealing a vault. The kind of calm only ranchers, retired soldiers, and bomb techs learn to weaponize. Buster trailed behind me, tail twitching like he smelled trouble and bacon at the same time. I made one stop, the gun safe, but I didn't go for the 12 gauge. I reached lower, behind the ammo shelf, and pulled out the real firepower, my father's old land portfolio. The scroll crackled as I unrolled it on the kitchen table like it was an ancient war map. Thick paper, faded ink, and his name still embossed in the corner like a warning. Property of Richard Dawson. Do not assume anything. It was all there. Lot 17Z. Easement boundaries. Recorded in ink and blood and a notary seal from 1976 that still smelled like bourbon. And right through the heart of it, whining like a smug little snake, was the road the HOA had paved in the 80s, their beloved main access route now barricaded with cones and petty ambition. Cut clean through my land, not adjacent, not borrowed, on it. And there was no record of easement rights ever being granted. Not in any county file, not in any HOA charter, and sure as hell not in the fine print they love to laminate. So yeah, that wasn't just my road. It was their mistake. And suddenly, this wasn't just about gravel. This was about bloodlines, boundaries, and bureaucratic vengeance. I poured another cup of coffee and dialed the one person who could turn this into a legal opera, Sasha. She answered on the first ring. If this is about that thing with the tractor and the tax assessor, nope, I said. Worse. HOA tried to barricade my driveway. A pause. Oh, hell yes, she whispered. Tell me everything. Session Dawson, my younger cousin, land use attorney, and chaos enthusiast, the kind of person who uses phrases like adverse possession in casual conversation and once cross-examined a zoning board into tears. She lives for moments like this. I sent her the deeds, the map, and a photo of Karen standing in her pastel throne pose by the cones. And 10 minutes later, she replied, I'm driving up. We're building a damn toll gate. And while Sasha prepped her legal thermonuclear warhead, the HOA wasn't slowing down. No, they were escalating. By midday, they had set up a full-blown checkpoint at the base of my drive, complete with a folding table, plastic chairs, a pop-up tent, and a sign that said Security Station, Community Access Only. Community access on my land. One guy even had a lanyard with Access Manager printed in Comic Sans. A woman beside him was knitting next to a cooler of LaCroix like this was Coachella for control freaks. It was almost impressive, like watching toddlers build a fortress out of couch cushions and then try to charge you rent. I didn't confront them, not yet, because when you're setting a trap, you don't chase the mouse, you let it think it owns the cheese. They thought clipboards and cones were weapons. Wait until they meet a toll booth and a lawyer with a caffeine problem. Because what happens when the HOA tries to charge you for using your own land? Simple. You start charging back. Rick showed up in his beat-up Silverado, grinning like he'd just been handed permission to commit legal mischief. Heard you need a gate, he said, spitting sunflower seeds into the dirt like punctuation. One that makes a statement. I nodded. A toll booth, Rick, with flair. By noon, we were mapping post placement like generals on a battlefield. By 2, the posts were sunk. By 3, the keypad box was blinking like a spaceship cockpit. And at 4, we mounted the sign, hand-painted in bold red lettering, access fee, $200, 0 cents, /day. No exceptions. This land ain't free unless I say so. That sign sang louder than church bells on Sunday. The wood gleamed, the bolts were polished, and the whole contraption stood tall like a middle finger carved from cedar. Rick stepped back, admired his handiwork, then slapped my shoulder. That ought to rattle some clipboards. It didn't take long. By 4:17 p.m., I heard it, the angry sputter of HO-grade great indignation. A pearl-white Lexus screeched to a halt just short of the new gate, and out stormed Karen. She wore her signature pastel visor like a crown and a windbreaker that rustled with the sound of self-righteousness. Her heels punched the gravel like it owed her money. What the hell is this? She shrieked, gesturing at the gate like it had personally insulted her golden retriever. A gate, I replied, sipping coffee like I was hosting a backyard barbecue. On my land, this is obstruction. I'm calling the sheriff. Great. Want me to dial for you? She blinked, caught off guard. You can't just put up a gate. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a laminated copy of the land deed, Sasha's idea, of course, and held it out like a priest offering scripture. This road runs through lot 17Z. That's me. Always has been. You've been trespassing for years, Karen. You're out of line. Nope, you're out of land. I pointed to the sign. If you or your HOA buddies want to keep driving through my ranch, you can Venmo me. I take PayPal too. She looked like she might combust. This is extortion. I shrugged. Call it what you want. I call it rent. Karen stared at the keypad like it was counting down to her own social collapse. Then she did what all suburban tyrants do when they lose control. She pulled out her phone and started furiously documenting the gate. I'm reporting this to the HOA board. Cool. Tell them they're 10 years late on tolls. Interest starts tomorrow. She stormed off, muttering about unauthorized construction and war against order. I waved. Rick waved too, then offered her a flyer for his gate installation service. She didn't take it. Her tires spun gravel all the way back down the drive. But here's the kicker. You think that stopped them? Oh, sweet summer child. The next morning, the HOA came back with the reinforcements, folding chairs, clipboards, a cooler. They set up a pop-up tent just beyond the gate and called it a community safety monitoring station. One guy even had a whistle. It was going to be a long week. By Saturday morning, I knew they'd escalate. Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds in silence. She was the type to wrap those wounds in laminated gauze and call a committee meeting. So it wasn't a total shock when I saw them setting up tables near the East Path, my backup access road. Cupcakes, banners, a sad canopy flapping in the wind like it knew this wasn't real. They called it a community bake sale for beautification, but the only thing beautified was their cover story. They lined the drive with folding tables full of scented candles, homemade soap, and banana bread that looked like it had been weaponized. One lady was selling gluten-free air. Another had hand-knit toilet paper cozies. But let's be honest, this wasn't about carbs or preps. It was a blockade, disguised in cinnamon rolls. Their message was clear. If you won't let us use your road, we'll just cut off your plan B. Now, I could have lawyered up, but that wasn't my style. No, I decided to host a party. I made a few calls. By Sunday morning, Goat Justice BBQ was live. We had hay bales, we had cider, we had a snow cone machine spinning so fast it threatened to launch into orbit. But the star of the show, Diesel, the goat, my neighbor's semi-retired lawnmower and part-time chaos agent. Diesel had attitude, zero manners, and a deeply personal vendetta against laminated signs. And naturally, I gave him free range. The moment Diesel locked eyes on Karen's newest cease and desist notice taped to my gatepost, it was over. He trotted over like a goat on a mission, gave it one sniff, and promptly started chewing like it owed him money. By the time the HOA could react, half the paper was gone, and Diesel looked proud enough to run for mayor. Kids laughed, parents cheered, I handed out pulled pork sliders, and Rick, who had now decided he was the official event DJ, blasted Johnny Cash over portable speakers. Someone brought a bouncy castle. A local food blogger showed up with a drone. It was chaos, it was glorious, and it was viral bait. And, oh, did the internet buy it. A short clip of Diesel gnawing through that cease and desist made its way online by sunset. The caption, "This goat understands property law better than your HOA." It hit 10,000 views before I finished my third beer. By midnight, it was over 100,000 and climbing fast. The comment section was a battlefield of memes, legal hot takes, and people begging for Diesel merch. Karen, meanwhile, had gone suspiciously quiet. But don't be fooled. When people like Karen go silent, it's not peace. It's plotting. And what do you think is the end? Oh, no, my friend. That goat was just the beginning. 3 days after Diesel became an internet icon, a small padded envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just my name scrawled like someone had written it with righteous fury in a coffee buzz. Inside was a USB drive and a sandwich bag like it had survived. Espionage or a bad lunch. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting malware or HOA propaganda. What I got was drone footage. Clear, steady, with overlaid property lines in fluorescent yellow. And there it was. The HOA clubhouse, their proud little fortress of pettiness, and that pristine tennis court they bragged about every summer, both sitting about 15 feet onto my land. I stared at the screen like it owed me money. Technically, it did. Sasha showed up 20 minutes later with her signature combo, highlighters, legal pads, and a bottle of stress wine. She took one look at the footage, dropped her bag, and whispered, "Holy hell, they're squatting on your taxes." She broke it down fast. If those structures are on your property and were never permitted or recorded officially, you've got claims for back rent, code violations, and probably enough leverage to make HOA Karen eat her laminated bylaws. We didn't even need to just suggest the county reevaluate the zoning and ownership. That meant retroactive property taxes, which meant fines, which meant the HOA already bleeding from public ridicule, was now staring down a financial nosebleed. And just when you think they'd back off, they doubled down. That Thursday, HOA Karen called an emergency board meeting. The agenda? Public nuisance proceedings regarding unauthorized gate installation and uncooperative behavior by non-member resident. Translation? Let's put Red on trial. I showed up in my best shirt, boots polished, Sasha by my side like a legal chainsaw, in lipstick. The clubhouse was packed, folding chairs in perfect little rows, lemonade sweating in paper cups, and tension so thick it could file a restraining order. Karen stood front and center, pearl necklace glowing like a boss-level indicator. She launched into a speech about community values and respectful cohesion, as if that made up for blocking my driveway and building a tennis court on my land. Her voice wobbled only once when Sasha plugged in the projector and played that drone footage across the clubhouse wall like it was closing night at a scandalous film festival. Gasps, murmurs. Someone dropped a cup. Karen tried to pivot. We believe in dialogue, I cut in. You built a tennis court on my soil and then told me my gate was the problem? You're lucky I haven't charged y'all court fees. Stasha stepped up with a knockout, a cease and desist letter citing unauthorized land use, plus a county tax inquiry notice. One board member fainted. Another pulled out his phone and started Googling, can an HOA go bankrupt? And if you thought the toll gate was the punchline, that was just the knock-knock joke, because this wasn't about fences or goats anymore. This was about territory, and suddenly the HOA wasn't protecting theirs. They were trespassing on mine. Saturday rolled in like a sitcom season finale. I showed up at the clubhouse with Sasha, armed with binders, a flash drive, and a thermos full of I told you so. The sign outside read emergency HOA hearing, community conduct review, which sounded like a court proceeding and a bake-off at a confused baby. Inside, every folding chair was occupied. The snack table was stacked with off-brand cookies and passive-aggressive lemonade. I nodded at a few neighbors who, just a week ago, were either ignoring me or whispering HOA prayers under their breath. Today they were on edge. They'd smelled the smoke. Now they were waiting for the fire. Karen stood at the front, gripping the mic like it owed her money. Her pearls looked tighter than usual, and her hair had that unmistakable, I lost sleep trying to stay in power frizz. She launched into her speech something about individuals undermining collective harmony and structures that threaten the community's aesthetic integrity. I waited, let her build her little house of cardboard authority. Then Sasha stepped up, plugged in the USB, and said, we'd like to present Exhibit A. Boom, drone footage on full display, clubhouse, tennis courts, koi pond, all stretching gracefully over land they didn't own. Karen blinked. Someone in the back gasped. One guy coughed like he swallowed a pretzel wrong. But that was just the warm-up. Sasha kept going. In addition to the unauthorized use of private land, we'd like to draw attention to board decisions made without legal quorum, misuse of emergency funds labeled wine fountain project, and multiple bylaw enforcements inconsistent with county code. She flipped a page. Also, a neighbor was fined for having a planter in non-compliant turquoise. Another was warned for playing harmonica after 6 p.m. That's not governance, that's dictatorship with a clipboard. That broke the dam. One neighbor stood up. She fined me for my American flag being too faded. Another, she banned Halloween decorations because they confused delivery drivers. A third waved a letter. She said my bird feeder violated squirrel neutrality policy. Karen's face drained like a punctured juice box. Her hands trembled. The clipboard, her weapon of choice, slipped from her grip and hit the floor with a crack that echoed like a gavel from the gods. Still, she tried to speak. This is a smear campaign, but it's too late. The room had turned. People were nodding at me now, not her. Someone handed Sasha a cookie, not even sarcastically. Then Hank, the retired mailman turned reluctant board member, stood and cleared his throat. I think it's time we consider a vote to enter negotiation with Mr. Dawson and maybe reconsider our leadership structure. Applause, real applause. Karen didn't clap. She didn't nod. She just stood there, jaw clenched, shaking her head in tiny, defiant micro tremors. And then, without a word, she walked out. But trust me, she wasn't done. The board had agreed to talk. Karen, she was sharpening her next move. It was a Tuesday morning when a black SUV rolled up to my gate like it was auditioning for a low-budget spy film. Out stepped a man in a suit so stiff it could have stood on its own. Hair slicked, tie strangling his neck, clipboard tucked under one arm like he was about to grade my land ownership. He squinted at the keypad, then at the camera, then back at the keypad, like maybe intimidation worked on steel. "This is Jeff Raymond," he said into the intercom, voice smooth as reheated suit. "Legal counsel for the HOA board. I'd like a word." I leaned into the mic. "Entry fee still $200 today, Jeff. You can Venmo it over any time." He hesitated, then muttered, "I'll wait." 15 minutes later, I walked down with coffee in one hand and Buster, my cattle dog, trotting beside me like we were off to war. Jeff extended a handshake. I gave him a look that said, "Try again." "The HOA is prepared to make a settlement offer," he began, eyes darting like someone who just realized he parked on private property, which he had. He pulled out a check. $15,000 in exchange for taking down the gate and restoring access. I took a sip. 15 grand? He nodded like he was offering me a golden goose. I stared him down. "Jeff, that doesn't even cover the first 100 days. You've been trespassing for over 15 years. He adjusted his collar. "Surely we can be reasonable." "I am," I said. 200,000, that's my discounted rate. Otherwise, the gate stays up, the tolls keep running, and your board keeps hemorrhaging members like a bad poker night. Jeff's face twitched like he wasn't used to being told no, especially not by a man in boots and a faded flannel shirt. He left without another word, probably needed to go cry into a PowerPoint. That evening, I found a note in my mailbox, sloppy handwriting, unsigned. "You were right, she's a tyrant." HOA emergency fund? The cracks were spreading. By the end of the week, 3 board members had resigned. One of them left a pie on my porch with a thank you note under the crust. Another emailed Sasha, confessing Glenda had been forging compliance violations for years. Internal emails leaked. Suddenly, HOA meetings were half empty and their weekly updates read more like surrender letters. And Glenda, she was quiet. Too quiet. Which meant she wasn't defeated. She was regrouping. Let's just say the power balance had shifted. She built her empire on gravel. I turned it into gold. And I hadn't even played my final card yet. 2 weeks after the negotiations closed, the gate still stood, tall, glossy, and silently smug, like it knew it had won a war without ever raising its voice. The new HOA board, freshly detoxed of power-hungry Karens, agreed to let it remain, for aesthetic purposes only. I laughed at the phrasing. Aesthetic? That gate had more character than half the people who'd ever voted in an HOA meeting. It wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a line in the dirt, a lesson carved in cedar and reinforced with steel. Glenda didn't sign the agreement. Of course she didn't. She just vanished. One morning, her Lexus was gone, and by noon, a generic for sale sign sprouted from her lawn like a weed that had finally found its courage. No party, no goodbye casserole, just silence. It was the loudest thing she'd ever said. Rumor had it she moved to a gated community with stricter rules. Somewhere she could weaponize bylaws without anyone fighting back. Poor neighborhood. Things started changing fast. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now waved. A few even stopped by with pies, casseroles, and because this was still semi-rural America, a six-pack and some fence repair tools. Kids who used to whisper, "That's the angry gate man," asked if they could pet Buster or help feed Diesel the goat. Turns out Diesel had a fan club now. People still reposted the video of him eating the HOA's cease and desist letter with the kind of gusto reserved for barbecue ribs. Local teens started calling him Justice Goat. I didn't correct them. A few months later, we held a fall harvest event right on my lot. Hay rides, cornbread. Sasha ran a booth titled Legal Advice for the HOA Traumatized, and I set up a dunk tank with a sign that read, "Hit the target, dunk a bylaw." We raised $2,000 for the local animal shelter. The HOA didn't just tolerate it, they helped set up chairs. Hank, the ex-mailman turned board member, even brought his karaoke machine. And when someone sang, "I fought the law and the law won," he winked at me. The gate, it stopped charging, but it stayed up, proud and watchful. A monument, a silent reminder that property lines matter, clipboards aren't weapons, and no matter how pastille their polo, is above the land deed. And if you listened real close, you could almost hear it creak with pride every time someone passed through. The gate doesn't charge anymore, but it still remembers. At the end of the day, this wasn't just about a toll gate, a goat, or a laminated vendetta. It was about calling out nonsense when it parks itself on your lawn and tries to invoice you for the view. Real power doesn't always wear a badge or hold a gavel. Sometimes it just comes down to knowing your worth, your rights, and not letting anyone gaslight you into giving them up. This story is your reminder: boundaries matter, paperwork matters, and so does standing up, even if you're standing alone, preferably with coffee and a sarcastic grin. If you've ever dealt with a mini tyrant in khakis or just enjoyed watching justice served with a side of BBQ, smash that like button. Drop your wildest HOA or Karen encounter in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just fight back, we win, laugh, and maybe install a gate or two. Stay smart, stay salty, stay you.